Welcome to this recording of our third Are You Ready for Recovery webinar, delivered by the Travel Foundation as part of the Big Up Small Business programme, supporting small and medium tourism businesses in Jamaica. The programme is run in partnership with and funded by TUI Care Foundation, and this series of webinars was facilitated with TPD Co. It's part of a series of 4 webinars with an accompanying toolkit, and this third webinar and toolkit cover pricing considerations for your tourism business. Okay, so just some quick introductions from us. I'm Rebecca Armstrong. I'm the Destinations Programme Officer at the Travel Foundation in the UK, and I'm presenting today with my colleague Coral Purver-Williams, who is the Jamaica Programme Coordinator, also from the Travel Foundation. So Coral will be doing the main presentation today on pricing principles. I'll just hand over to Coral at that point. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Good morning, everyone. As Rebecca said, the aim of this module that we're going to be doing today is to look at the basic principles of pricing. We're not really going to go into depth with this. We'll just concentrate on the concepts that you need to understand in order to price your products competitively, whilst also allowing you to make a profit. And we'll also look briefly at how the pandemic is affecting pricing. So let's start first with how the pandemic is affecting pricing. As you know, many tourism businesses have been forced to rethink how they package and how they sell their products and services. The reduction in travel of international tourists and the restrictions from COVID-19 protocols have really led many businesses to rethink how they price their products, both to attract the domestic market as well as a few international tourists who are actually traveling. And even though travel is now slowly returning, the COVID-19 protocols that were existing are still in place. And so there is still a need for you to adapt to your pricing structures. So let us look at some of the factors that have really affected pricing and actually continue to affect how you price your products. Firstly, the implementation of safety measures such as timed entry, particularly for tours, capacity limits, and social distancing measures. These requirements have actually reduced the number of customers that you can safely host. So you really need to consider how it is that you will adjust your pricing to ensure that you can still make a profit. Another factor is that now you have to accommodate smaller group sizes, and this itself may require you to raise the cost per person. Again, consider how this is going to impact your bookings and ultimately how it is going to impact your profits. And in terms of competition, one thing to note is that the downturn in travel has led to more tourism businesses offering discounts. This in itself has created greater competition, not just among businesses within Jamaica, but also with other destinations which are also offering discounts and promotions to attract tourists. Also, this ongoing pandemic has created an uncertain environment, and as new variants of the virus emerge, it has really led to a situation where businesses could be facing cancellations if travel restrictions are imposed again. In fact, the discovery of the latest variant, Omicron, has already resulted in some countries restricting travel from states in Southern Africa, and much uncertainty about what is going to come. This kind of situation and the general uncertainty that it creates can impact your booking and your profits. So you'll need again to consider how it is that you're going to set your prices to cover these various scenarios. So given the uncertain environment that tourism businesses are operating in now, one of the things that has become more important than ever is the need for you to really safeguard your business. So I'm just going to go through a few of the strategies that you may need to implement in order for you to safeguard the longevity of your business. Firstly, you need to review your cancellation policies. Now, if you don't already have a cancellation policy, I'm going to suggest that it is time for you to write one. because flexible cancellation policies have really become very, very commonplace during the pandemic. Many people, many travelers are now willing to book excursions and activities or even accommodations with providers that are offering flexible cancellation policies. Now, of course, having a flexible cancellation policy in itself could wreak some havoc on your cash flow and of course can negatively impact your earnings and your profits. So you really need to be smart about how you're going to structure your business. And in thinking about your strategy, one approach that you could take to having a cancellation policy really could be that you tier your prices. For instance, if you offer tours, you could set your policy such that your cheapest tours can be canceled for free and your premium tours can require a cancellation fee. You should also consider whether a flexible, a moderate, or a rigid cancellation policy is the right one for your business. I'm going to suggest that you do some research, look at the kinds of cancellation policies that are currently being offered by tour operators and by online travel agencies, just to get an idea of how to structure your own cancellation policy. The thing is, whatever method that you choose to adopt, what you need to bear in mind is that flexible cancellation policies have really become top of mind with travelers. Another strategy that you can employ to safeguard your business is to review the cancellation policies that you have with third parties. You'll need to ensure that that cancellation policy is consistent across all your sales channels, including your own website. So the same thing also applies to your own suppliers and business partners. Consider negotiating with them for something that is a little bit more flexible. And another way to safeguard your business is to protect your profits and the long-term endurance of your business. For example, rather than issue a full refund, you could issue a voucher that gives an extended validity, or you could reschedule bookings or tours to a different later date. You should also adopt strategies to maintain your prices instead of lowering them. Thing is, lowering prices is really often a knee-jerk reaction, and this can cheapen the value of the experiences that you provide and can put you in an unnecessary price competition. So instead of lowering your prices, you should look at ways to maintain your prices. For instance, you can change up the experience that you offer, or you can throw in an added value that really doesn't cost you too much to provide. That way you retain your prices and you still deliver a good quality product. And one more thing to do is to focus on your existing customers who have not canceled their trips. Look at how you can increase the value of the experience that you really offer to them. Now is going to be the time for you to deliver an experience that is truly rewarding and which will also result in positive reviews for your business. And my final recommendation is you can create strategic partnerships with other local businesses to develop new products or packages and to differentiate your offer to make it a little bit more competitive. So think of what services you can combine with other businesses in your area to create a unique experience for your customers. In the midst of the continued challenges that is being posed by the ongoing pandemic, one way to get your business through this in a really intact way is to be flexible. So if you look at this slide, the screenshot is really part of an email that Expedia sends out to their members to promote the experiences and the accommodations that they have on offer. For every available booking option that was included in that email, there was an indication of whether free cancellation is available. And the truth really is that Expedia is not the only one. Since the pandemic, free cancellations and refunds have become a marketing tool for all the online travel agencies and booking sites, as well as attractions, accommodation providers, and even airlines. So really the point I want to drive home here is that flexible booking options are really now very, very commonplace. So having gone through that, let's look at how to price your product. To start us off, we're going to look at some basic principles. So these concepts that I want to say are concepts that you really should become familiar with. We'll start with competitive pricing. If you are working with sound agents or tour operators, you will know that they are searching for good value and they're searching for competitive pricing to ensure their own profit. Of course, they also want to know where they stand. But even if you're not working with tour operators or ground agents, you still want to know, that your price can hold up in the market. One other concept for you to be familiar with is good value for money. And that in itself can be pretty subjective as it is interpreted differently, of course, by different people. But as a rule, the more expensive your accommodation or your experience or attraction or accommodation is, the more tourists will expect from you in terms of what it is that's included, in terms of your level of expertise and your ability to deliver excellent customer service. Another concept to be familiar with is stability. Think about this, your price should remain the same over a set period, including differences in seasonality. You know that most tour operators will offer yearly contracts, so they're going to expect the price to remain stable during the contract period. And then there is profitability. You are in business to make a profit, so you need to ensure that you're able to make a profit for yourself. And likewise, the tour operators themselves that you contract with will need to be able to generate enough sales to make a decent profit margin for them to justify selling your product. So what is a good price? For one, it enables your business to make a profit, to earn a decent living. So you should set your price to make a profit. A good price is also not too expensive when compared to your competitors. You'll need to ensure that your price is in line with the market. If you are more experienced, you will need to show what extra value you offer. Bear in mind that tour operators will always compare your price to that of similar excursions or similar products. And of course, if your product or your experience is unique or if it's different from others in the market, then you already have a competitive edge and you have the ability to price higher. A good price is also a price that tourists are willing to pay. Some tourists, well, we all know many tourists are very price conscious and some of them are even traveling on limited budget. But tour operators and customers are usually willing to pay premium prices and premium rates for unique and for different experiences. So in a nutshell, a good price really equals good value for money. So let's continue with the pricing concepts, and we're going to look at some common pricing types, which you may already know. Per person pricing, which is, for example, adult or child prices. This is commonly usually used by activities or attraction and transportation operators, or maybe even, dormitory style accommodation and campsites. Then there's per unit pricing, which refers to a set price for one unit, like for instance, price per night. This is usually the standard way to price accommodations. Oftentimes, the advertised price is for 2 people. So if the accommodation fits more than 2 guests, it can have a mix of per unit pricing with extra adult and child rates. And then the next is single or double occupancy. And this is usually more common for bed and breakfast and for all-inclusive accommodations. In this case, there is a single rate and there's usually a double rate, which by the way is not double that of the single rate. Continuing with the concepts, these are some key concepts that you need to consider when you're setting your prices. So you need to bear these in mind because we're going to go through the pricing steps shortly. So fixed costs, these are costs that remain constant regardless of the number of customers that you get. And examples of fixed costs include things like rent, your utilities, your mortgage, staff salaries, insurance, and so on. Then there is variable costs. These are costs that change or they vary depending on the number of customers that you get. So think about costs that you incur to provide, like souvenirs, if you're providing souvenirs for the people on a tour, food, drinks, those kinds of costs would be considered your variable costs. And then there is carrying capacity, which refers to the maximum number of customers that you can accommodate on your tour or excursion. So when deciding your carrying capacity, though, you need to take into account things like legal regulations, environmental considerations, and also comfort. And now, of course, you also have to take into account the COVID-19 social distancing requirements and the capacity limits in place. But you also do need to look also at practical things like how many people are able to hear and how many people are able to see the tour guide comfortably. So you need to use these factors and determine your minimum and your maximum numbers. So let's look at the steps, the process for pricing your product. When you're pricing your product, there are some steps that you need to go through in order to arrive at your price. Now, step 1 is you'll need to determine how much it costs you to operate your business before you host any visitors. Now, these are going to be your fixed costs. Once again, your rent and mortgage, your insurance, your staff salaries, your insurance, I mentioned that, right? Then there is the step 2, which is you need to determine how much it's going to cost you to deliver your product to each customer. And these, again, are going to be your variable costs, things like your food, souvenirs, drink that you provide to your customers. And then step 3 is you need to determine the maximum number of people that you can host on any one tour at any one time. And then again, like I said, there are some factors that will influence this that you will need to consider. So we're going to look at a simple example to cost an excursion to Sam's Mango Farm. Now, if you're present last week and the week before, you'll remember our case of Sam's Mango Farm. For those who are joining us for the first time this week, I'm just going to go quickly through the scenario. Sam has a mango farm in the Jamaican countryside coast. Now, he wants to diversify so that he can earn an income outside of the mango season. He has put in some rustic cabins and he has put in some tree houses, and he's now offering accommodations to tourists. He also designed a nice tour of his farm where he's providing guided tours and giving tourists interesting facts about the mangoes, about how they're farmed, and a little bit of information about his family history. He's also providing bicycles for guests to ride in the surrounding area. Now, Sam's wife, Shelley, has planned to provide cooking lessons to tourists in an outdoor kitchen that they have on the farm. And his brother, Leroy, who has a glass bottom boat moored on a beach nearby, has offered to take guests on snorkeling excursions. So that is, in general, the case study. What we're going to do now is we're going to use the pricing concepts that I've just outlined, and we're going to do a simple costing of the excursion to Sam's Mango Farm. So take a note of this table. Look at the fixed costs and look at the variable costs. Note in Sam's fixed costs, we have his staff salaries for 2 people. He has a bike loan, a loan for the bicycles, and he had included there are his overheads, which include things like his public liability insurance, his utilities, his mortgage, and so on for the farm. Now, this total is $95 per tour. Note his variable costs. So included in that are costs for souvenir, because Sam provides a souvenir to every person that comes on his tour, and then also drinks and lunch. There's a cost for that as well. That total variable cost is $8 per person. And Sam has determined his maximum capacity at 10 people. I'd like to note here that it's always very important for you to calculate your costs. Never just pluck a figure out of thin air and second guess what you think your costs are going to be so that they can fit in what you think the tour operators want or what you think your tour should cost. Always know your costs. Now, having identified your fixed and your variable costs and your carrying capacity, step 4 of the process is to calculate your break-even point. And that is the point of difference where the cost and the revenue are equal. So at this point, you're neither making a profit nor a loss. And this is calculated by dividing the cost for the visit by the number of people. So look at this simplified example using Sam's Mango Farm again. If 2 people visit the attraction, you'll see where Sam's total cost for the group is $111. When divided by 2, which is the number of people in the group, he will need to charge $55.50 per person in order for him to break even. Now, when you think about it, $55.50 per person may really not be a very competitive price. So right away, you can see that Sam's minimum capacity may really need to be more than 2. So let's look at what happens if 10 people visit the attraction. If 10 people visit the attraction, Sam's total cost for the visit, which is his fixed cost plus his variable cost, is $175. When he divides that by the number of people, which is 10 number of people on the tour, he would need to charge $17.50 in order to break even. Now, just thinking off the bat, that may be a more competitive price. So this is what Sam really did to arrive at his maximum capacity of 10 persons per tour, looking at all the different scenarios with the different number of persons who can come in and looking at what is a very competitive price that he can charge so that he can also cover his expenses. But the thing to bear in mind is that the $17.50 is not his final price. Your break-even price is not the final price that your customers are going to see. You'll have to take into account the distribution and you'll have to work out your margin. And this is going to be where your profit comes in. So step 5 is to calculate your margins to arrive at the final prices. Now, if you are dealing with tour operators and with ground agents, they're going to put their markup on that price to sell to their clients. And remember, they have their own costs to cover, like transportation and so on. So all parties in the distribution chain must make a profit, and they must do so by adding a markup. Now, as the business owner, you also need to make a profit, but your markup will often be lower than that of the tour operator or the ground handler. So as a general rule, I think your markup would be ranging from about 10 to 30%, and that will be your net price or your wholesale price. And then the ground handlers would add their own markup of about 20 to 30%. And the tour operator or the excursion providers will also add their markup, which usually ranges about 20 to 30%. And one final warning, you need to consider that if you intend to accept walk-ins or if you intend to accept direct customers, you must not undercut the price that the tour operator is charging. So this is going to lead to unfair competition, and oftentimes it will upset both the customers and the tour operator and the agent. So the price you offer to direct customers is going to be known as your rack rate. If this price is different from the price that the other customers are paying through their tour operators, especially if it's lower, you'll need to be able to clearly show the difference in experience or the added value that you're offering in this tour. In this case, you could offer a different experience than that which a customer who books through the tour operator is going to receive. So basically what I'm saying is that any difference in price needs to be justifiable. And 2 things that you need to note. 1, all parties in the distribution chain must make a profit out of selling the product by adding a markup on top of the break-even price. And 2, your business's markup will often be lower than that of the ground agent or of the tour operator. So here's an example of how Sam can see the different prices he would need to charge for different group sizes after adding his markup. So if you look at that table, you'll see that for 10 people, the break-even price is $17.50. So Sam would then add his 20% markup, and he would arrive at a net price or a wholesale price of $21. Now, that is the price that he would offer to ground agents and to tour operators. And one thing that you need to note is that the profit margin is really an average markup, but generally it can be expected to range anywhere from 10 to 30%. So this table shows the markup along the supply chain. For a group of 10, Sam offers the tour operator a net rate of $21. The tour operator will then add their markup, but that is not going to be the rack rate, which Sam is going to offer to direct customers. As I mentioned before, as a general rule, you'll want to sell that same tour to customers who book directly. You need to add a higher markup for that if you do. So typically that averages around 40 to 50%. And so looking at this table, if Sam adds a markup of 50%, his rack rate would be $31.50 per person. And that is the rate he would offer to direct customers and walk-ins. So in that case, he's not competing with a tour operator that is contracted to sell his tour. So in negotiating prices with agents, one of the things that you need to do when approaching agents to sell your products is that you need to be able to show how the price is calculated. You also need to be able to show what exactly will be delivered. So what will the customer get for the money? You need to show why your product is appealing. So for example, does it fill a gap in the market? And you also need to show why your product is good value for money compared to similar competing products. If you are able to demonstrate these things, it will put you in a really strong negotiating position and will lower the likelihood of you having to reduce your selling price. In your negotiations, you should also agree your payment terms and your conditions before taking any booking. So direct payment terms will include after the product is delivered. And this is usually the most common agreement. And the rule is usually to pay within a 30-day period. Another payment term could be before the product is delivered. And this is, again, usually the case with smaller tour operators or with ground handlers that specialize in tailor-made holidays. And another term could be on the day the product is delivered, which is usually very rare. And also remember to establish your cancellation and your refund policy. So let's look at pricing for accommodations. Now, if you offer accommodations, the same pricing principles will apply. Once you are able to determine how your variable costs and your fixed costs, you can now work out your break-even nightly rate. And again, you must cover your costs and ensure that you're making a profit. If you are selling accommodations through tour operators and online travel agents, you will need to take their commission into account. So the price you provide to them and the price which is advertised is going to be your rack rate, and they will take their commission from that before they actually pay you. This slide here shows the hotels.com page for a hotel in Treasure Beach, and the rates that you're seeing at the bottom are the different rates that are offered by hotels.com, by Expedia, by TripAdvisor, and Agoda. And this is all for the same property on the same night. Since the rack rate is the official advertised rate that the online travel agencies charge, and since they take their cut from that, you really want to ensure that you price your rooms so that you can still make a profit. And it is going to be very important for you to be aware of your markup and the commission levels on each site, because again, each online travel agency will have different rates for their commission levels. So you need to be aware of what each commission is in order to ensure that you price your product to still make a profit. As with tours and with activities, if you provide accommodation, you also need to add your percentage markup, like I said before, in order to make a profit. Now, how much markup you add in order to determine your final selling price, which is your rack rate, will depend on several added factors. And these will include things like your location, the rating and the standard of the facilities that you offer, the demand, the competition, the seasonality. So let us say that you have a unique property or it's in a unique setting and you have virtually no competition and that your rooms are in demand, then you'll be able to set a really high price. On the other hand, if your property is not similar to others in the resort area, that is densely populated with tourist accommodations, and if there is low demand for your rooms, you will need to set your price such that you remain competitive in order to attract bookings. If you're selling if your products are not selling, if you find your rooms are not selling, you could consider putting in place strategies that are going to help you to boost sales. So you can offer promotional strategies like, early booking bonus or early booking discounts. You can offer seasonal and midweek rates, discounts for long stays or for repeat customers. You can look at offering things like promotional packages and extras. So for example, you can pair your accommodation with an add-on like a free breakfast, or you can upsell by offering incentives for upgrading, or you can cross-sell. For example, you can offer discounts on tours after the guest has booked and before they arrive. So there are different strategies that you can put in place to kind of boost your sales if things are slow. And one other thing, a word to the wise: do not put all your eggs in one basket. You're gonna want to find ways to maximize your profit. You can sell through online travel agencies. You can sell excursions through local ground agents. You can sell to big hotel groups. You can sell direct to customers, etc. These are the channels to which you can sell your products to be able to help to maximize your profits. Because if you're with one tour operator or one online travel agent and that agent or tour operator goes bust, you're going to be left out in the cold. So you want to make sure that you are maximizing the different ways that you can sell your product in order to make your profits. If we look at Sam's Mango Farm, Sam's holistic approach now includes selling rooms through online travel agents. He's selling through local ground agents, and he's selling to some big hotel groups. And he also gets a commission from sending customers on Leroy's boat excursions. And he gets a small profit from crafts that are made locally by workers at his farm. So find different ways of maximizing your profits, whatever you can do. This will all help. So before I close, I just want to recap the 5 steps in pricing your product. So step one, again, is you're going to need to work out your fixed costs. How much does it cost you to operate your business before you host any visitors? Step two is you're going to work out your variable costs. How much does it cost you to deliver your product to each customer? Step three is you're going to work out your carrying capacity. And step four, calculate your break-even point. And finally, step five, calculate your margins and your final prices. You should always know how much it costs you to run each tour or host a guest if you're operating an accommodation. It's important that you understand your costs, not just for your own sake, but also remember that being transparent is crucial for your negotiations with agents and tour operators. They're going to need to ensure that they make a profit, and you must ensure that you make a profit if your business is going to be continuing. Now, before I end, I just want to make a note that I know this has been a lot to take in terms of the concepts. And like I said, we did not go into much detail in terms of the math of it. But if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, please don't worry. What with the toolkit that Rebecca mentioned earlier that we're going to be providing you with at the end of this session includes some working examples that will be able to guide you when you're setting your prices. But we're also going to be including a plug and play template, which is going to have the formulas included in there. So once you plug in your numbers and your costs, your tour groups and so on, it will automatically calculate the final prices for you because it has the various markup levels as well. So this toolkit is going to be, and the template is going to be able to give you a really practical tool to be able to work with when you're calculating the pricing for your own businesses.
Great, thank you. Okay, so moving on, I'm delighted to welcome Richard Thorpe here today. He's the Managing Director of Amstar DMC in Jamaica, which is a leading destination management company. They provide services to individuals, travel agencies, tour operators, corporations, and meeting planners. We're delighted to have Richard with us, who's going to give us some insights from that private sector perspective, really, on how pricing works and offering you some advice and tips. So very warm welcome to you, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, is everyone hearing me? Oops.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, we're hearing you.
Add light here.
We'll stop sharing.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Interesting presentation by Carl. Certainly, she covered many of the areas that I had intended to speak about. I will try to add on to what she has said. Very important in the whole pricing strategy, it still comes back to the product. Product is key before you even think about pricing, because if you don't have a marketable product, whatever price you put on it is not going to work. And in this modern day of TripAdvisor and Google and everything else, people know instantly about your product. So the service, the value, the uniqueness, the wow factor, very important. People must say wow. This is critical to the success of your product. So you must ensure you have the right product. I'm going to divert a little bit from Carl's pricing structure, in that as a tour operator, we look at our pricing in the reverse. We look at the price that the customer gets and work backwards from that point. And I say this because the end result, or the start point, in Coral's theory, you have to get to the end to come up with the customer pricing. But once you give it to the tour operator, he works in the other direction. So he's looking at it from the customer's perspective, working backwards. I say this, that it is very important that once you determine that price for the customer, that the price integrity is critical. Now, the fact of the matter is, frequently you have a tour or a product, and you're going to find customers from different tour operators, from different sources, ending up on the same tour. And you can't afford to have that customer sitting next to someone and says, oh, I bought the tour for $80. And the person beside them says, oh, but Amstar charged me $95 for the same tour. Right away, you create dissatisfaction. No matter what the value of the tour was or how good the tour was, once there is that price differential, the customer becomes dissatisfied. And that is very, very critical in your whole pricing strategy. Again, the tour operators and the various other ground transportation personnel, the different sources of business, there is no rule that says everyone must make the same commission. When you price the product and you have that rack rate, which the customer pays when he gets to your gate, that rack rate must equate back to, be factored into that same pricing that the tour operator is selling the product for. Bear in mind, your rack rate would not include transportation because the visitor would have come to your gate and paid the rack rate. Why I say this is that a taxi driver or a ground transportation provider who picks up two customers and brings them to your gate, the commission level that he would make is not as high as would be demanded by a tour operator. The bottom line is that person has far less overhead costs than the tour operator. So the tour operator is going to demand a bigger piece of the pie, for want of a better term. So many tour operators also look at the commission level and determine how much your tour will be sold. So the average tour operator is selling 100 tours. So how do you make your tour be front of mind? Again, many people look at it and think, oh, well, I'll make my tour the cheapest tour. And so that becomes the tour that sells the most. And contrary to that popular belief, it's actually the opposite. We as tour operators look to sell the most expensive tour first. So the cheap tour is of little value to a tour operator. Our focus is on how much does the tour operator make by selling your tour. So having a $30 tour, while it may be a great value and while it might be a great value to the customer, is not valuable to the tour operator because they are seeing that tour as having very little income. So we will sell it, but we're not going to push it. And that leads to the comment made by Carl of combining tours with other entities in your area so that you create a larger tour with greater value and hence giving the tour operator more incentive to sell that tour. So the two ways that a tour operator looks at your product is not only the percentage margin that is provided to the tour operator, but more importantly, what is the dollar margin? So a $50 tour with a 40% margin is going to give the operator $20 for selling the tour. But a $100 tour with a 30% margin is going to give that tour operator $30. So he is going to be far more inclined to sell that $100 tour than he is to sell the tour that is at $50, even though your percentage margin is higher. So again, you have to look at your market. If you are, and I understand you're mostly small businesses, and if you are not capable of handling high volumes, the question is how do I make my tour more valuable? How do I package my tour to make it more valuable? And again, the misconception that cheaper is better, not true, absolutely not true. The visitor is willing to spend more on a unique experience that gives them value for money. So surprisingly enough, if you look at the whole question of the pandemic, everyone would have thought that, okay, we had to drop prices to attract people. We had to, give away the product to get people here. The average value of the sale is less because it's, there is less value out there. The reality is that the pandemic has changed the market completely. Up until last month, 95% of the visitors to Jamaica were purely out of the United States. There were no Canadians coming. There were little or no Europeans coming. So the whole mix of business changed completely during the pandemic. It is going to change again now because now you have all the other countries coming back as well as the cruise ships coming back. So the demand for product is there. So this demand invariably is going to facilitate actually price increases rather than price decreases. So if you have the right product, don't be afraid to charge for that product. So there is no fixed formula as to what the percentages are. But I can say that from a tour operator perspective, they are looking at the tours from the perspective of the value of that tour and from the perspective of the value of that tour that comes to them. So again, focus on your competitive set. Is your product unique? Is it one of a kind? If it is one of a kind, and you're the only one who has it, and it is offering good value, you can charge a premium just for that uniqueness, because you don't have to have 100 guests a day to make money. You can charge a higher margin to cover your fixed operating costs, simply because you only need 20 customers a day. That's all your product can accommodate, and the demand is there. So there are many examples of this, and I'll use like Stush in the Bush, which is a vegetarian restaurant. They have a very fixed amount of people per day, and they will tell you what it costs. Some people say, oh, that's high. But guess what? They're full every day. I use Zimbali in Westmoreland. Again, a cooking experience, vegetarian farm to table experience. Most people would not walk into a restaurant in Montego Bay and want to spend that amount of money for a meal. But they go to Zimbali because of the environment, the farm to table produce, the cooking demonstration, and they're paying huge amounts of money to experience this. So again, look at your product. Do not get into a pricing war. It benefits no one. If your competitors want to drop their prices, you focus on the quality of your product, the value added that you provide, differentiate yourself from your competitor, but do not compromise the quality of the product to get into a pricing war with anyone. It benefits no one. Again, I think that the perspective from the tour operator is more a cost down, because that's where they make their income, whereas you as a provider of a service has to initially do your cost up pricing. And again, it's not written in stone that I must make 20% and all tour operators will make 20%. No. The people who are willing to give you the volume of business are going to expect a higher commission level than the person who is providing you with 2 or 10 or 20. So you can vary your commission structure to the different tour operators, and this allows the big tour operator to maintain his price integrity, because he has the highest overhead costs of operation. And if you were to give the taxi driver the same commission structure as the tour operator, that taxi driver would be sitting out at the gate of the hotel. He is willing to do it for half of that commission, and so he will sell it at a steeply discounted price, which devalues your product and will result in the tour operators being unwilling to sell your product. So it is very important that you have that rack rate, you insist that that is the value for your product, and you ensure that everyone sells at that price to the final customer, including your online providers. I think that about covers it from my perspective. not sure if anyone has any questions or anything that I can expand on regarding that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Burke. I think that was really sage advice providing to everybody. We are going to allow persons to ask any questions that they may have. So if you have any questions for Mr. Burke, you may type it in the chat and we'll ask it so that he can answer you.
And again, I will emphasize that during the pandemic, your operating costs go up because, as simple as it may seem, a bus can only carry 70% of their capacity. So right away, the operating cost for everyone has gone up. Most of our tour operators raise their prices. We have seen where it has had zero impact on sales. As long as people are consistent, that similar products are sold at a similar price, and that you are offering value for money, people are not afraid to pay for it. But again, quality of product is key.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think those your advice has been really very useful, and I think this is something that, because we're in a really changing environment with the pandemic and everything, so it's very useful that they are getting the perspective from you, the tour operator, in terms of what the approach is that they need to take. Of course, everybody approach is going to be unique to their own situation and their own products, but certainly in terms of general guidance, I think this is useful. If there are any questions, feel free to post it in the chat, and we'll take it. You can ask questions of Mr. Burke, or you can ask general questions on pricing or comments. Does anyone have any questions?
No question. Just want to say thanks and really appreciate all that you have said. It's good stuff. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you. The information provided by Mr. Burke is really something very useful, particularly for tours and for persons who are operating tours and attractions. When you do get the toolkit with the pricing templates, you should bear that in mind when you're putting in your pricing, your costing and so on, in order to arrive at your final rack rate, which is what he's saying that you need to be able to provide to them in order to prevent the unnecessary competition among tour operators. I'm correct, right, Mr. Burke? And that's what you're saying? So,
that's correct. If you give everybody the same wholesale price, one person will mark it up 10%, another one will mark it up 20, another 30, another 40. So you'll have 4 different prices in the marketplace. And at the end of the day, the people who require the highest margin simply will not sell the product. We just won't even bother to list it.
Right. So the template will allow you to be able to put in your markup to arrive at your net at your rack rate that you can offer. I have one question here, and it says it's more of product presentation. Are all registered locations going to be present? I don't know, on the visitjamaica.com site with contact information? This is a different question. I guess we'll take that question because we can't answer that question here. We don't know about the Visit Jamaica requirements. We'll take that question for the person who just posed it, and we'll make a note and respond and send you the response, email you the response. Do we have any other questions relevant to the pricing or products to operators in terms of market, getting your products to tour operators and so on in general? Okay. I think that probably is it then. No one else has any other questions. Rebecca, did you want to make a final note?
Sure. Perhaps if you can share your screen, Coral, and we'll just round up with some key takeaways. I think the other thing is, I would say with any questions is with pricing, it obviously is something that as you go along and as you use the toolkit and sort of start using those templates that we'll send out, I'm sure you may have questions as you go along in terms of how you put in your fixed costs, how you put in your variable costs, that kind of thing, which is which, all those things, because it's probably something that you kind of learn by doing as much as anything. So now that we've gone through the principles today, as Coral has gone through them, and as you look through them in the toolkit, we're really happy to help. If you do have questions in the next few weeks as you use the toolkit and look at your own pricing, we're really happy to answer questions on email. So do bear that in mind, that we're here to help. So just going through to some final takeaways from today. So yeah, I think there's probably three key takeaways really. The first one is that understanding the principles of pricing really is essential for success in any business. That once you understand those principles, so things like fixed costs, variable costs, carrying capacity, etc., and the factors that can impact on those, so your location, who your competition are, demand for your product, all those kind of different variables. Once you've got a grip of those and understood how they apply to your own business, that really puts you in a good place to calculate and set a competitive price that will help you make a profit, which is obviously the purpose. Second takeaway really is how the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to have an impact on pricing on an ongoing basis. I mean, it obviously already is, but I think as time goes on, that's going to continue for some time. So that in terms of things like businesses being expected to implement new measures to comply with COVID-19 protocols for the safety of staff and customers, those things are completely necessary, and they will have an impact on pricing. So things like smaller group sizes at attractions and for activities, reduced numbers at accommodation and restaurants. So again, understanding how those measures will impact profitability is going to be key to your pricing strategy. And then the final takeaway from today is flexible cancellation policies, how important those are. So again, with uncertainties surrounding travel and the likelihood of COVID-19 disrupting customers' plans, they're going to really want to know that they can cancel or make changes to their bookings without being penalised for doing that. So having flexible cancellation and refund policies will be necessary for your business to stay competitive and maintain those contracts that you do have with tour operator and ground handler, ground agents. That's going to be central really. The more flexible that you can be and offering those different refund policies, as Coral said, it might be a case of looking at the different types of things that you could offer in terms of cancellation, vouchers, refunds, possibility of booking later. All those flexible policies are really, really important at this point in time. Okay, we just had a couple of questions in the chat. One was about how to prevent multiple prices in the market. So I think that was Richard's point. I think Richard has left, but I think it was about his point about, if we set a net price and then the different operators might apply different percentages to that. I guess one of the responses to that would be about his point was that the rack rate needs to stay the same so that your product really keeps the same value, so that everybody is presented with that same sort of top price, that it's not discounted heavily for certain groups. I think that was the main point that he was making on that. We can certainly ask him to input more by email, but Coral, did you have any more thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I'll just elaborate a little bit. When I went through, what my recommendation was is that you would provide the wholesale or the net rate to the tour operator, which is the rate you would have after you have calculated your break-even point and added on your markup. What Mr. Burke is saying is that what would be preferable is that you provide them with the rack rate. And so the rack rate is going to be a higher markup, which is what you'll be adding on to the break-even point in order to get your own profits. So rather than give them the net rate and allowing them to put on their own markup, which would require that Amstar puts on their markup. If you contract with another tour operator, they'll add their markup, and the markup could vary, which would result in different price points in the market. What he's saying is that in order to avoid that and to avoid that kind of unnecessary competition, they would rather you provide them with your rack rate, which is going to be your final rate after you've done your breakup and you've added on your 40 or your 50%, whatever profit it is that you want to make from this booking. So it would be the same rate that you're going to be offering to your direct booking. So you'll give everybody that one rack rate, and then they will sell it. At that point, when you're negotiating with the tour operators, what you're going to be doing is you're going to negotiate it with them now, how much profit, how much commission, sorry, they will take out of that rack rate. So essentially they'll offer the same price. Pretty much what happens with online travel agents is they'll offer the same price to everybody, but the commission that they pay you now is going to be from that rack rate. And that commission will be dependent on what your negotiations have been with the tour operator. So you could negotiate with one, if it's a large tour operator, for instance, you could negotiate that you get 20% commission, that they get 20% commission. You could negotiate with a smaller one that they take 10% commission. Whatever the commission structure is you agree with the tour operators may vary, but the rate that you give them will be the same. I hope that answers the question or clarifies it a little bit more.
Great, and I think his point was that you know, those operators that are bringing you volume customers will probably be obviously pushing for a bigger chunk, a bigger commission percentage of that rack rate, whereas those that are perhaps just bringing you a few, you'll be in a stronger position to negotiate a smaller commission for them, but obviously you won't be getting as much business from them. So you know, that's the sort of the trade-off, I guess, is that the more business those operators are bringing you, they're going to be looking for that bigger commission, but they're bringing you more business.
Right. And I guess you'll have to determine how it is. If they're bringing you a larger volume, you would probably make your commission structure smaller so that you get less, but you get more people coming to you. So essentially it adds up. So your negotiation is going to vary. Your commission structure is going to vary from tour operator to tour operator, depending on various factors, how big they are, how much business they'll bring you, and so on. When you get the templates, it will give you the ability to be able to put in your pricing and then to be able to put in your various markup to arrive at your net rate as well as your rack rate. So essentially some tour operators are still, I gather, asking for wholesale and net rates though. So even though Amstar may be asking for the rack rate, I understand that some tour operators still ask people to provide their net rates. So again, it's going to be dependent on what they offer and what they ask for. But in your negotiations, you could also negotiate with them that you give them your rack rate and that they take a commission out of that. So you do have, I imagine, that flexibility to be able to determine, to be able to negotiate what it is, what rates you give and what commission you get. I think there's a statement. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Yes, perfect. There was one other question, I think, Rebecca, what was it?
The other question was about whether we could go through the calculations, that maybe it might be helpful. I mean, we're sort of up to the sort of formal end of the program for today, but it's been a shorter session. We're very happy to take a little bit of time now at the end, if anybody would like to stay on and just go back through the calculations, the sort of worked example of Sam's Mango Farm, that might be helpful now that we've heard from Richard as well, and it sort of brought it
Oops.
With any we'll finish. Welcome to go when they need to, but yes, we will go back through those in a moment.
So You seeing it? Okay. So, yeah, great. As Rebecca said, after this, if anyone wants to stay on, because this is kind of like the formal end, to go through the pricing template again, we can do that. But just to let you know, I just want to thank you all for joining us today and for participating in the poll that we just went through. And to let you know that our final webinar in the series of webinar that we're putting on will take place next week. So that's module 4 we'll be doing next week, 9th December. That's next week, Thursday at 10 a.m. In that module, we're going to talk a little bit about how to get ready for business, looking at routes to market, looking at customer service communications, as well as online sales and marketing, which has become even more important during the pandemic. So you don't want to miss that at all. We'll also have some guest presenters next week, which will be able to take you through. And also just to say finally too, that if you have any questions or if you have any feedback, you can always send us an email to jamaica@thetravelfoundation.org. Thank you all again for participating. Stay safe. See you next week. If you want to go through the template again, those of you who do want to do so can stay online. All right, so we can go back from the very beginning, from the table. Recall I said that the first step is going to be that you determine what your fixed costs are, and the second step is going to be that you determine what your variable costs are. Remember now, your fixed costs are going to be costs that don't change regardless of whether or not you have a tour, or regardless of whether or not if you're in accommodation, regardless of whether or not you have anybody coming into your property. So your fixed costs are going to be things like your salaries that you have to pay. Think about your gardeners. If you think about Sam's Mango Farm, he still has the gardeners, the farm hands that he has to pay. He may not have to pay the tour guide, but he may still have people who help around the farm to keep the place clean and so on. So those are your fixed costs. He has a loan for the bikes. So even though the bikes are used in the tour, these are the loan has to be paid whether or not he has visitors. So he has that loan, and then you have things like public liability insurance. You have your rent if you're renting the premises, if you're renting things. You have your mortgage. Those are fixed costs, which are going to be in place, whether or not you have tours. You have to pay them on a monthly or an annual basis, depending on how you pay your bills. So these are your fixed costs. And if you look at that table, it's everything adds up to $95 per tour. Now, your businesses are not that simple, right? You have many other types of costs, utilities and so on that you'll need to put in place. All of those you'll consider. And like I said, when you get the template, it will outline the different costs, and we'll also leave additional space. So if you have additional costs that you have to put in that we've not thought of, you'll have space to put those in and calculate your pricing just the same. So those are your fixed costs. Then you have your variable costs, and the variable costs I'll go through again are costs that change depending on whether or not you have a tour. How much does it cost you to run the tour? That's your variable cost. If you are providing souvenir for the people who come onto the tour, if you are providing food when they come to your premises, those costs you would only incur if you have a tour. If you don't have a tour, you won't be spending that, right? So those are your variable costs. And in order to determine your total costs, you have to add both your fixed costs and your variable costs per tour in order to determine what your costs are for the entire tour. And then once you determined what your maximum capacity is, remember Mr. Burke spoke about the possibility that you could only be getting small tour groups. You have to look at what your general situation is. How many people can you reasonably accommodate? You have to take everything into consideration. Like I said, nowadays, you also have to take into consideration the maximum limits in terms of COVID-19 and so on. So you're looking at all of those variables, and you're looking at the cost to see how many people you can reasonably and feasibly accommodate to determine your maximum capacity. So once you determine those, you move on to the next step. And the next step is going to be that you're going to calculate your break-even point. So in order to determine your maximum capacity, if you look at this table, it will show you the cost your break-even point for different numbers of people. So that's how you can play with it to kind of get a feel of when you think about what your minimum and maximum numbers could be. When you want to look at how much your costs are going to be, you can play with it in terms of plugging in different numbers of people on the tour to get an idea of what the costing will be. So you'll use this to to calculate your break-even point. So this table really gives you an idea of what your break-even point could be depending on how many people are on the tour. So if you see number of people, you have 2. When you look at your total fixed cost of 95 people, you look at the total variable cost of $16 per person, and sorry, $16 for the tour. Now, if you look at it, it is $8. When Sam calculated earlier, his variable cost was $8 per person. You multiply that by the 2 people, your variable cost for that tour is going to be 16 people. When you add both the $95 and the $16, you're looking at your total cost to run that tour is $111. If you divide that now by the number of people on the tour, which is the 2, you're looking at your cost to run that tour with 2 people. Your break even now is $55.50. And you can carry on like that using different tour group sizes, number of people in order to determine what your break-even point is going to be at each step of the way. So having done that, you can now come up with what you think your maximum capacity will be for this tour. How many people can you reasonably accommodate in order for you to be able to break even? So having done this, then you can move on to your next step, which is to calculate what your margin should be. So I'll go to the next, right. So here now you're looking at how to calculate your margin. If you use this table, when your fixed cost is 95, it's 2 people at $95. So you're taking 2 people, your fixed cost is $95. Your variable cost is $16 for those 2 people. The total cost is $111, what we've gone through before. Your break even is $55.50. If you add a markup of 20%, let us say you want to make a profit of 20%, and you add your markup, you're looking at $11.10 added on to that, which gives you a net price of $66.60. Now, what I was initially saying was that you would offer that net price or that wholesale price to a tour operator. What Mr. Burke is saying is that they'd rather get your rack rate. So this net wholesale price is what you're going to add up when you think about how much how much profit you want to earn. But if you're not giving a net price and you're only going to be giving a rack rate to the tour operator, we can go on to the next table, which is this one. You see here, if you decide that at a price, look at Sam, 10 people, and his break-even point is $17.50. You may decide that, okay, you're only going to give a rack rate to the tour operator. Therefore, it's going to be right away, you're going to determine how much your profit is going to be on this $17.50. You could add your 50% as your markup. So let's say, like Sam, you add 50% onto that break-even price of $17.50. Your rack rate is now $31.50. What Mr. Burke is saying is that is the rate he wants. He doesn't want a net price. He wants your your rack rate, and then he will sell that to the tourist at that rate. Now, this is the price you're going to be offering everybody. So if everybody wants your rack rate, you give them that $31.50. You could negotiate with an Amstar, for instance, to get 30% or the whole 50% commission from that. Or you could negotiate with an operator, a tour operator, to get 30% commission from that. You will need to know what the minimum is that you can get from that. You already know that your $17.50 is your break-even point. So you know that whatever you get from the tour operator, if you give them a net rate, you cannot get less than $17 after they take their commission out. So you are going to be negotiating with them how much commission they can take out of that in order for you to get enough to cover your expenses and still make a profit. So essentially, that's just the difference. Rather than give a a wholesale price, or net price, you're giving a rack rate. And I guess in this instance, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of what amount of profit you can earn, because you have the flexibility now to negotiate different commission rates with different tour operators that you negotiate with. If it's the case of accommodations, for instance, of course, some online travel agents have already set what their commission rates are. They'll set like it's 3% or it's 5% or it's 10%. So you will know right away how much money you are going to get after they sell that for that price and take their 3% out. So you use these scenarios to be able to determine what your final price is that you offer to the agents, the tour operators and the travel agents. And like he said, which is, there's no hard and fast rule that you must only add 50% to the break-even price in order to get your net rate, or that you must only add 30% to that price. You are very flexible in terms of how much you add, as long as you're making it into a rate that is going to be competitive, that you can reasonably sell for the product that you're offering. So you look at your product, you look at your scenario, you look at your environment, you look at your competition, look at what they're selling similar products for, and then you determine, after you've looked at your break-even point, how much percent can you add to your break-even point and mark up your product by, in order for it still to be competitive, but still be able to allow you to earn a profit. Is that a little bit clearer? Feel free to post in the chat if that helps a little bit. But, you know, like I said before, though, when you do get that toolkit and the template that we're going to send out to you, you will get these tables that we will provide, and you'll be able to plug in the number of people, you'll be able to plug in your fixed costs, you'll be able to plug in your variable costs. You can plug in the different costs that you have to pay each month, and it will calculate your fixed costs. Plug in your different expenses for hosting a tour, and it will calculate your variable cost. We'll put in the formulas, we'll set them so that it's easily, you know, manipulated, and then it will automatically calculate what markup you can get, what amount you can get at what markup is there. So we'll put in various markup ranges, 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%. You can change that, I imagine, to be able to mark up your product based on how much profit you want to be able to earn from it. But it's really just a guide to give you a general idea of how to calculate your costs. The very important thing that you want to know is that you are covering your costs. So if you choose to offer a tour operator a rack rate, which is only like a 40% profit, profit that you get from your break-even point, you need to know when you're negotiating how much commission you can negotiate for them to take out. The important thing, I think, if you know your costs and if you know what goes into costing, delivering your product, and if you know how your cost is calculated, it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to negotiate with a tour operator and to be able to negotiate a commission structure with them. But you can't do this unless you really know your costs. So it's important for you to be able to have an idea of what it costs you to have that tour, what it costs you to run that tour, what it costs you to have your property, what it costs you to take in guests. You have to know the different costs. At some point, perhaps you may think, well, this is not going to be worth it, right? But it's important for you to be able to know what your costs are in order for you to know how it is you're going to price your product so that you can make a profit from it, because otherwise it's not sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. I think this slide is really helpful because it just gives you that kind of that bottom line, really. So here, you know, the $21 is the point that you will not go below, because below $21 you don't make enough profit to make it worthwhile for yourself. You know, Sam on this one's decided that 20% is what his his markup, you know, above his break-even point, he wants to make 20%, and that's reasonable, and that's what he's decided. And so that creates that, you know, in his negotiations, it's giving him that kind of power, I guess, in the negotiations. In his mind, he's thinking, I'm not going to go below 21 because it's not profitable at that point for me. It's not worth it. So, you know, as Coral says, having that clear understanding of your costs and the profit margin that you need to have as a business, creates that, it equips you well to go into those negotiations, I think, with operators. Thanks, Coral.
Thanks, no problem. Any questions? Or does anyone require any further clarification?
That's good. I mean, we are, as I said before, we're here on email, very happy to help and support as you start to use the toolkit. And if you've got any questions, really happy to support at that point. So do get in touch.
Okay, great. Thank you all again for joining us, and you can always post your questions. If you think of anything afterwards, you can always send us an email, jamaica@thetravelfoundation.org. Look out for your email with a link to your toolkit, and look out for the email with the link to your certificate, which you'll get after these sessions end. So thank you once more, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.